So welcome to our family forum for Tuesday, November 10th at 5 o'clock. If you have not done so already, please type your name in the chat. You can put it publicly or send it privately to me as the way that we record attendance. So our agenda for tonight's meeting are some school-wide announcements and to discuss the plans for phase 1 reopening. And then as always, we'll have time devoted at the end for question and answer as well as discussion. So the announcements are fairly brief for this week's meeting. The first thing to make sure that is on everyone's radar is that we have our report card conferences coming up on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, November 23rd to the 25th, the short week before Thanksgiving break. And the conferences are happening from 1 to 3 o'clock in the afternoons. We will have one evening conference on the Tuesday from 5 to 7. And all of these conferences are virtual. So the teachers are managing the sign up for their classrooms. It will be on a Zoom link similar to what we did for back to school night, but you'll have one scheduled time for your child between 10 and 15 minutes, depending on how many children are in the class. If you have not heard yet from your child's teacher about how to sign up for report card conferences, I keep saying back to school night, for report card conferences, you can definitely reach out to them, and the sign up should be posted by the end of this week. Later on in this presentation, we are absolutely going to be talking about phase 1 of reopening, which was when families had the opportunity to sign up for hybrid if interested. This, I think, is still important information, even though the district's plan has shifted at this time. We did, for our kindergarten, first, and second grade families, we were able to hear from every single family, which was wonderful, just to know how people were feeling and what their preferences were. And at that time, when the survey closed, we had around 90 students who had selected the hybrid model, and between 75, closer to 80 actually, families who had selected for their students to remain in the virtual setting. So this information is important to share, even though the reopening has been delayed, because when the reopening does move forward with a hybrid approach for our kindergarten, first, and second graders, this information is preserved. It wasn't submitted for no reason. Of course, families will have the opportunity to change their minds at whatever point that may be, but this is going to be the starting point that we jump off from. And similarly, the district was assigning cohorts for each family, and that will still be done centrally by downtown. And then on the school level, I'll have the ability, with numbers permitting, to make adjustments for the days of the week that students would be attending for their hybrid instruction. So 2 more announcements. Our book fair, we partnered with Big Blue Marble Bookstore right down the street. It closed last week, but I learned this morning that there has been an informal extension. So if you're still interested in placing an order for some books from the local bookstore, the PTA, CW Henry PTA, is getting a percentage of the proceeds as a fundraiser. So families are able to continue ordering through this upcoming Friday, November the 13th, and you can place orders over the phone or online. There is a website that was shared on the flyer. And it's just important to make sure that when you're placing your order, if you're doing it in person, you verbally mention, or if you are ordering it online, you put it in a note on your shopping cart that you're shopping as a CW Henry parent or family member, so that they know to designate your order with the proceeds benefiting the PTA. And then the final announcement before we pivot to talk about the delayed reopening is just around if you ordered spiritware, so CW Henry swag, and you wanted to come and pick it up, or if you needed to come to the school building for any other reason, let's say it's to pick up a book or materials for your child's class. I've been getting a lot of questions about how do you do that and when is the best time. So on a regular school week, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays in the afternoon are the preferable time to come to the building, just because I have a couple additional staff members in the main office on those days who are able to answer the doorbell and move throughout the building to get whatever items you are picking up. I understand that those 9 hours across the week don't work for everybody. So if you would like to pick up an item and you can't make it work in that time, you can send me an email directly, or if you're connected to our school-wide Remind account, you can send me a message through Remind to coordinate a time. I'm at the building generally Monday through Friday during the entire school days and sometimes into the evenings. and I'm flexible to make sure that I'm there to get things to you if needed. I just don't have a standard time, so just send me a message and we'll figure out a way to make it work. This week, because school is closed tomorrow in honor of Veterans Day, we will have help available on Thursday. So if you want to come and pick up anything on the afternoon this upcoming Thursday, you don't need to make an appointment. You can just come and ring the main entrance doorbell. Okay, so the last announcement relates to the information that was shared this afternoon or late this morning around reopening. So for anybody who was not aware, Dr. Height made the decision today to delay phase 1 of reopening, which was when our kindergarten, first and second grade teachers and staff, followed by students, would be returning to the school building. So I hyperlinked a letter that I sent out this afternoon. If you did not receive it, it went through the school-wide remind as well as through the email messenger that we use. So if you didn't receive the letter, can you send me a private message with your name and just let me know if you prefer to receive it through email or through remind, and I'll make sure that your information is there. And I'm gonna just drop a link to the letter. If anybody did not have the opportunity to read it, I just put it in the chat. Letting you know that, as COVID numbers are rising in Philadelphia, the school district has finally made the determination that it is not safe to bring our staff and our students back into the building. So they haven't announced a date when they're going to reassess the situation. I would assume that it will be when COVID numbers begin to fall, hopefully, throughout the winter. But as of right now, students will not be coming into the building the week of November 30th, and staff were scheduled to return on this upcoming Monday, November 16th, and that is not happening. So if you're the parent of a kindergartner, first or second grader, I sent out a letter yesterday detailing for you how we were pivoting to a half-day schedule in the afternoons so that teachers had the time to participate in required district-wide professional development. The information that is in the letter that I dropped in the chat, but some of the professional development is still occurring. The time frame has been shortened. So there will still be a couple of days that will feel more like a Friday, even though they're not on a Friday, but it will not continue through the entirety of next week, which is what I shared yesterday. Just to remind you, we will still have half days on November 23rd, 24th, and 25th because those are report card conferences days, but teachers won't be in professional development. And I'm talking more about PD in an upcoming slide. So just to remind everybody, this now is an outdated implementation pathway, but I do think it is still important to keep in the forefront of our minds. It just gives a timeline and shows the decision points when different things would be happening within the district and then most specifically at Henry. So I would just say you can ignore the italicized dates below and know that beginning, this one right here where it says phasing in the next group of instructional staff, it is not happening it didn't happen on the 9th, and then it was changed to happen on the 16th. It's not going to be happening on the 16th, but when our city and the health of our city is in a place that we can pick this conversation up again, this is going to be, I think, where we begin. So my hope is that when we are at that point, teachers will have already participated in the professional development. Our classrooms will be completely set up with the technology and the furniture and the social distancing so that it doesn't feel, from a school leader's perspective, like things are happening very rushed and in the last minute sort of way, which, to be quite honest, is how the past couple weeks have really felt. It's been quite frantic trying to prepare and make sure that everything's ready. So now we will still be working very busily behind the scenes to get everything set up, and we're going to still follow this timeline, just with some different dates in mind. So this is a slide that I shared with my staff, that was shared with principals over the weekend, which gives a little bit more information just around what our kindergarten, first and second grade teachers are doing and why we're shifting to a half-day schedule for a couple days. And just for transparency, it was important to share it with families as well. So I changed the date. No teachers at Henry participated in professional development today. I asked them to hold off so that we gave families a little bit more time to prepare and not have an unexpected transition to a half-day schedule. But some teachers across the district did participate in professional development today. And the reason for this professional development is there are a number of sessions. I'm going to click to the next slide that you'll see on this slide, designed to prepare teachers. This is all virtual professional development. So all kindergarten, first and second grade teachers were scheduled to and are still going to receive professional development that will prepare them for hybrid instruction using a document camera, helping them to integrate the technology, and additional time to plan. And this does not affect you or your kids, but I think it's helpful just to know the ways that the teachers are being supported behind the scenes. These are all of the professional development sessions that they were scheduled to participate over in between now and Thanksgiving. And now they're going to be participating in some of them now, and other ones will be folded in before kids return for hybrid instruction. One thing that I think is important to point out on this slide at the bottom, you'll see that previously teachers were scheduled 10 hours in the afternoon to prepare and set up their classrooms. So as I've said already, they will not be returning on Monday, November the 16th, but please know that when they do return, and I think that this is really important, they will have time in the building to get their classrooms and their spaces ready. It takes a lot of time to prepare. And then in addition to setting up the classroom and getting the room ready, there's going to be additional time, some of that time used to plan and to figure out exactly any shifts that they have to make, how they're going to do it, and they'll be able to plan with their grade partners, which is how we get the work done. It's really, really important. And it's also important to me, as much as possible in the school day, to use the professional development time for teachers to collaborate during work hours, because I know there are some educators on the call. One of the most challenging things about being a teacher is that the work never ends. So it is important to me at Henry, as much as possible, that teachers have designated time during the day for this very crucial planning. So if you are a parent of a kindergarten, first or second grade student, and you're wondering, well, why are we shifting to this half-day schedule? I hope that this slide gives you a little bit more information about what teachers are doing behind the scenes. The final update around reopening, and even though it's not happening most immediately, I think it's still very pertinent, is just an update on the ventilation assessments that I shared in our last family forum 2 weeks ago. So if you were not in the family forum, I shared that we had 5 rooms at Henry that were listed for 0-person occupancy. And in the last meeting, I spoke about how there were some issues, or seemed to be some issues, with our exhaust fans in the building, which is why certain classrooms were listed at 0 occupancy. The plan was that until those fans were corrected and the problem, there was no longer a problem, those rooms absolutely would not be used for students, and they would not be used for multi-person occupancy. I am glad to say that today, I do have an update for 3 of those classrooms, which is 110, a kindergarten room, as well as 101 and 102, 2 of our first grade rooms. And I'm going to just drop a link in the chat before I share that update. So this is a link to a document that is publicly available on the School District of Philadelphia's website. And it just goes room by room, if you're interested, and explains exactly what the results were from each ventilation assessment completed in the rooms. And if you click on the document, you'll see that for 101 and 102, it'll say not running. And what I learned today after a walkthrough with some members of the facilities team, is that it's not that the exhaust fans weren't working, it was that the univents in those specific classrooms were not turned on for whatever reason at that time of the assessment, and the issue has, at this point, seems to be corrected. So this afternoon, after I left the building, I was promised that additional assessments would be completed. So I'll be checking to make sure that that happens by the end of the week. And my hope is that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, it takes roughly 10 days at least to get the results from these assessments. We will have some numbers, hopefully, that will permit teachers and students to use those rooms for occupancy at whatever point folks are coming back into the building. Of course, because of the delay, it is not as urgent at this point, but I will say if the numbers show that we can safely have those rooms used for teaching and learning, I think it'll be a point of relief for our kindergarten and first grade teachers, because it's not fun to be displaced from your classroom. So that's great because it's good for our routines as well as for our students. All the materials are in those rooms, so that's helpful. And it was also a point of relief for me as well, because if it was the problem and it was easy to be fixed, it means we don't have to have extensive repairs occurring in the school building. So I will definitely give an update on these numbers when they are received. And the room, if your child is in either of the third grade classrooms in the portable, or in Mr. Peoples' class 111, or Ms. Mullins' class 114, those are the classes in the portables. They were not assessed in the previous assessment, and they will be assessed now. So please stay tuned for all of that information. So that brings me to the end of the announcements for tonight's meeting. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you have a question about any of these slides, I'm happy to go back and reference anything that I already went over. You can feel free to type any questions into the chat, or feel free to come off of mute. Are there any questions at this time? Any feelings anybody wants to share about this afternoon's announcement? Are we happy? Are we feeling? How are we feeling?
Anastasia, this is Eric.
Eric, long time no see.
Yeah, since last night about this time.
Yeah.
No, so definitely feeling good about the announcement. Was definitely considering going to the school board and talking to them about the decision otherwise. So that saves me some work. But I'm curious, this decision then, does it stand for the rest of the marking period at least, and then they'll do a reassessment? Or is there, if the numbers miraculously go down, would they go jump directly into phase one again?
I can answer based on my own assumption. When there was a table I shared a couple meetings ago with what their timeline was with the 4+ phases, and the next phase was in mid-January, which is the end of the second marking period. I would assume, just based on how I feel, that that'll probably be the point at which they reassess. I think with flu season coming and holiday season and many folks traveling, it seems unlikely to me that the district would consider bringing kids back before that. But that's just how I'm feeling about it right now. But they haven't released a date. I did notice that when Kristen Graham wrote a piece in the Inquirer, it at first said that kids are going to stay virtual indefinitely, which I don't think is the case. They modified that language later on in the article. I think they may try again at some point, either in the late winter or early spring, but they haven't shared a date at this time for students or for kids.
But there's a clear indication now that obviously they were, the numbers according to the PDE, they weren't in the right space of the numbers. And so it was weird that they were continuing to go forward, even though those numbers had been changing previously. But now it seems like they're going to stick with the PDE numbers, I guess.
Your guess is as good as mine. If we're following the patterns and the trends, I will say, unofficially, I don't think Dr. Haidt likes to be the first superintendent to make these decisions. We usually follow in suit with other districts. Cherry Hill announced last night that they were transitioning from hybrid to virtual, and we announced similarly within 24 hours. So, I mean, before I worked in this Philadelphia school district, I was an educator in the New York City Department of Ed, and they have been hybrid with relative degrees of success since September. They have not pivoted to a full virtual model. So I think it's challenging, but in my personal opinion, with today being the highest number of positive COVID cases so far during this whole pandemic, I do feel like the superintendent is making the right decision. I think just sharing some of the sentiments that were shared this morning, and I referenced this in the letter, I do think that while many families are feeling relieved, there are also a significant number of families who are feeling bummed out for a number of reasons, right? Virtual learning is absolutely challenging for families with work schedules and different numbers of adults in the household. And I think I know kids are really missing that person-to-person interaction that we so value in schools. So I think that that is a real challenge. And one of the things we talked about this morning is with the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, families, I do have a town hall scheduled for Friday, but creating some space for students to come where we can just talk about how we're feeling, talking about ways as a school community that we stay connected to one another and sort of working through these emotions together, because I think I know it's really hard for kids to be away from their friends and their teachers and the school.
I just want to say I appreciate you saying that, because I totally understand why Height made the decision he has, and I don't it's a bummer, but I kind of saw it coming. But I'll just say, as a parent that has to send their kids to daycare a few days a week, and I work at a school too, and a lot of our students have to be in access centers because the parents work outside of the home, that the risks, they're already enduring a lot of the risks of having their kids in those kinds of environments. And in facilities that honestly have less resources than the Philadelphia school district, which is I'm sure really unbelievable, because I know that you guys are already under resourced. So I appreciate you acknowledging that, because that is hard that we're oh, we're gonna have to continue to pay to have them go somewhere with no end in sight. But I understand where the decisions were made, but I appreciate you acknowledging that.
Yeah, I think that's real. And I know people on the morning meeting, there were a number of people who felt the same way. Rachel, did I see you coming off mute to share something? No, okay.
Well, actually, no, but I did want to ask a small request. I am one of the parents who has been utilizing the playground at the school, which has been wonderful. And for the most part, I'm seeing all kids masked. And just this week, I noticed that there were some older kids that were playing that were not masked, and then some of the little kids that were kind of following them around were taking their masks off. And I know that I don't think that the school should be enforcing any of the play, because technically the school is not open. But I was wondering if there could be any signs put up, whether it's "thank you for wearing a mask," or while you're using the playground, please wear a mask, just so instead of being the mean parent on the playground that's correcting the kids, we could have something to point to, just to keep the area as safe as possible for the families that are using it to help the kids socialize and get some energy out.
Sure, I don't have a problem with that. We can work on making some signs. Thanks for the suggestion. I see a couple of people in the chat. Yeah. I just want to echo what Melanie just shared. I think it was a really difficult decision, which, while maybe one day I would want to be a superintendent, right now is definitely not a time. I don't envy any superintendent. Dr. Height, I don't think he can nobody's going to be happy with any decision that he makes. I think parents are really, really split. So I do think as a principal, it's been frustrating sometimes to receive information very last minute, or to be asked to make what feel like very drastic changes to our school's community right away. I do understand that they've been trying to maintain consistency for folks, and that's why the delay has happened. But I do think this decision was very, very difficult for Dr. Height and his team, and has also been really difficult for families. I also see a few minutes ago, Meg put in the chat that she believed, and this came up in the morning as well, that some families opted for the hybrid model at Henry because they wanted to maintain the opportunity to change to virtual, rather than they maybe wouldn't have sent their children at all, which I think is true. I mean, our numbers, the percentage of our kindergarten to second grade students who selected virtual was much higher than what happened in other schools across the city. I attribute that to what Meg suggested, and I also know that my team, we went above and beyond to really make contact with every single family. And we had families who said, oh yeah, I would have forgotten. Please put me down for hybrid. So I think it was a combination of those two things. Because if you didn't submit your survey, you were defaulted to virtual. So if parents didn't see it or if they didn't pick, they were counted in that bucket. But we'll have to see. One other question, which is less important right now, but it has been circulating across school leaders, is will all schools across the city open together at the same time, or will there be specific decisions around which schools open based specifically on those numbers, and how equitable is that for all kids? I would say based on the survey data that we got, Henry would be a school that opens. More than 50% of our families, even more than that, opted for the hybrid model. But let's say how unfair that would be if your child was at Lingelbach or Emblin or Houston and those schools didn't open because their percentages were lower. That then creates an inequitable situation for families in our community. So that is something I'm going to just pay close attention to in the upcoming weeks and months to see what happens. Yeah, I see a number of questions. Okay, Angela, a low-level question. Any word on the PSSA? There has not been any word at this time. As far as I know, it is still happening, but there hasn't been any information around, what it looks like virtually. I do know that we completed our first round of school-based assessments with a significant amount of guidance from the School District of Philadelphia. Of course, they're not nearly as high stakes as something like the PSSA because they're on the local level, but there's a lot of challenges that come with virtually assessing kids and a lot of questions on how reliable that data is or isn't, depending on a number of factors. And that is directly linked to equity as well. So we will have to keep that in mind and see, and I promise that I'll be sharing that when we hear more about it. Are there any other questions at this time?
Just real quick again on the clarity for the parent-teacher conferences. If we haven't received an email from our teacher about scheduling, should we just wait till the end of the week and then reach out?
Yeah, wait until I have a meeting with staff on Friday. I will plug it to them one more time. We talked about it last week, but I was checking on teachers' Google Classrooms today. A number of teachers have posted it on their stream or sent it through Remind. If you haven't heard yet, yeah, if you don't hear by Friday, definitely reach out to them or send me an email. Okay. I did, yeah, another question about the EBT cards. This came up, I think, in the last month or so. I haven't heard anything else. This was not the initiative of the district. It was something that we supported with, but I haven't heard any updates. I've heard a lot of people who are interested and want it to occur again. Or I also heard about a number of people who never received their EBT cards, perhaps with issues with addresses or that sort of thing. But there hasn't been any additional information released at this time. Any other questions? Well, if you do have a question, you can feel free to stay logged on. The next meeting is scheduled in 2 weeks. We're going to take a week off, go back to our 2-week schedule. It's also on a night when there's a PTA meeting. So I encourage you to, make yourself comfortable on Zoom, stay logged in for both. And, as things continue to come up, I'll still send out letters and information. And I just want to plug one more time, if you are not receiving my email, every time I send a remind message with a letter, I always send it through email as well. If you're not receiving it through one of those two modes of communication, send me a private message and I'll make sure that we correct that issue for you. All right, well, if there's not anything else, I hope everyone has a wonderful night and I'll see everybody soon.
Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.